in a matter of less than a year, I lost my income, had to start a new career, got divorced, and was fighting for custody of my three kids. And all on top of that, went through a bankruptcy because when I started with the mortgage company, they only offered me $10 an hour as an assistant until I got my license and got it going. So it was a 2000 end of 2015 and all of 2016 was really a bad. It was a humbling year because I had my identity as a good husband, as a multiple six-figure earner on my way to becoming a seven-figure earner, and speaking on stage in front of thousands of people. It was just one of those things that, my identity was just crushed because I had it in the wrong things. And so it was a very humbling time.
Yeah, man, lot to unpack here. Let's kind of work backwards. Let's start with the
Yeah.
identity thing, right? This is something I speak a lot. There's a big kind of part of my failures as a man and as a husband specifically was kind of that loss of identity, and it just like
Right.
threw me off the deep end, but I don't think it's like I say this a lot. It's not unique to like veterans getting out of the military, right?
True.
I think veterans think it's, oh, this is just something we deal with. It's like, no, man. Any man who like has tied himself into what he does or how much money he makes is at risk of this phenomenon. So like,
Right.
what are some of the like really hard truths you had to wrestle with, or did you have like these insecurities that your money kind of covered up, or like this status kind of covered up for you, that now confronted with them you had to like really face and learn? And I guess the ultimate question here is like, what do other guys, especially younger men, kind of maybe going through a career change or something like that, need to take away from your experience?
Yeah, well, it's funny. I lost my identity because it was in the wrong things. You could say that, but at the same time, I realized that my identity is not really one thing. I obviously I find my identity first and foremost in my faith in being a follower of Jesus and being a created being of God's, in His image. So that's where I find my true identity. Besides that, we can have so many different multiple identities. I think the mistake is that we just latch on to one because of our insecurities or because of lack of self-confidence. And so for me growing up, it was my body, like being in shape, like that. My identity was being in shape. Like everybody knew me as the guy who always had abs. I was lean. I was a soccer player. I wasn't some big dude, but I was always in shape. So when I tore my chest in the bench press competition in 2011, that was my identity was shattered there because I was like, I'm no longer going to be symmetrical. I'm no longer going to be able to, bench what I bench. Like my identity in that moment was shattered. That was probably the first time. I think that I lost my identity. And then the second time was the money side because people saw me as the successful guy speaking on stage, driving nice cars. And all of a sudden it's like, dude, I got to sell my car. So I'm like everybody who, because people hate on network marketing, multi-level marketing, and sometimes for good reason, but people hate on that. So people wanted to see me fail. I mean, it was shocking the stuff that they didn't say to me, but I'd had other friends come and tell me that other people said, and they were jealous. I mean, these are people who, there was a doctor a buddy of mine who was a doctor, and he was making $150,000 a year as a doctor with a medical degree, 150,000 in student loans, whatever the case is. And here I am selling a healthy energy drink, making twice what he's making. And people were jealous, but when that shut down, I was just embarrassed. I was like, man, people are going to, think that I'm not successful or that I couldn't hack it. Or, I think as men, we sometimes feel like a fraud. There's so many times I'm doing something and I was like, dude, I have no idea what I'm doing right now. And we're just doing it like that we're just going to try. And so like, I feel like, yeah. So, I mean, I feel like I didn't want to be a fraud. Could I do it again? Could I make six figures again? And then you realize that the same skills that you use in one thing, you can apply those skills elsewhere. And I had a lot of good mentors and like good coaches, because I've always believed in good coaches. I think everybody should have a coach. I mean, I got 3 different coaches right now for different things. I think that anybody who's looking to grow should. And I think the stuff that I learned leading up to my collapse, you could say, or my failure year, a lot helped me get through it. I heard Eric Thomas say one time, a setback is just set up for a comeback. And I was like, I'm not going to be the guy who used to do this, the guy who used to, be successful. And I was like, I'm going to come back and I'm going to come back better and stronger and just then help other people do the same thing. Because I know I'm not the only one who's gone through a failure. That's for sure.
Yeah, that resilience to get back up again. That's like, there's almost nothing sadder than like the guy who just talks about what he used to be, you know,
It's
like
brutal. You
the
hear it in the gym
middle-aged
all the
older
time.
guy who's like, man, I used to be such an athlete or whatever. It's like, well,
Yeah.
why aren't you still? You know what I mean? Like it's just, it's sad. You're just clinging on to a past version of yourself. And so, yeah, I appreciate you sharing so candidly, man. I know this is painful stuff, and but I think there's a lot of guys out there. We go through something that really knocks
Yeah.
us down like that, and I can definitely relate to having some pretty humbling years and having to get
Yeah.
back up from them. So appreciate
And the
that.
thing is, other people are going through them, and if we don't share our stories, sometimes they don't realize they can get through it, and then they don't realize that, hey, I'm allowed to share my story too. Because there's people who just need to hear. I spoke at a ceremony for a place here in town called the Father's Place, or a Father's Place, and it's for men and helps men with custody stuff. It helps them get back on their feet after jail or addiction or different stuff, and it's really cool place because men don't have a lot of access to things that women or other people do. So and just seeing these guys, just they're coming out of their hole, and I remember being there. I remember being like on the way back up because you spend so much time drowning at first when you're going through a crisis, whether someone's going through a job loss or someone's going through a marriage issue or someone's going through anything, a health issue. Sometimes you just feel so overwhelmed that you just don't even know what to do first. And I felt like that probably for close to 9 months, because most of it being because of the child custody battle and just not thinking I was going to get anywhere with that. But yeah, there's for sure power in sharing your story. So that's what I'm all about, is sharing my story. Not for me because it's embarrassing to share my failures, but for other men to see that they can make it through.
Yeah, and there's something to be said about men being equipped to take on the challenges of life that
Yeah.
are very weight bearing. So, for me personally, I feel like suffering and cruelty are some of the two necessary components that creates the necessity of a growth mindset. So, can you tell us like how the suffering that you experienced with your wife and with all these things helped you switch into a growth mindset and help you grow into a stronger man?
Yeah, I mean, it was, I'll be honest, it was just the fear of being a failure. It was that fear of people seeing me, and not even just other people seeing me, but I mean, honestly, probably my parents, because I've always wanted to make them proud. That's just, for some reason, that was just ingrained in me as a kid, and not from them. I honestly think it's because I was a child of six and I was one of the older ones. So every time there's a kid born after me, they needed more attention. So I think I just wanted to be seen. And I think one of the best ways to be seen was to be good, obedient, because they would always tell their friends, and my friends' parents would tell my parents, Richard was such a good boy and he was so nice and polite. And when I got that positive feedback, man, I just went with it and I just did more of the positive things. And I just always wanted to make my parents proud, and seeing my dad work so hard, and with his business, and he had ups and downs as well. I think the hardest thing for me was just having to change to a whole new career. Like in network marketing, you're selling a product. I can't just switch to another company and start selling a new product. People would be like, "You told me this was the best product," and so for me, it was that switching careers that was the most difficult, in the midst of still going through the divorce, still going through the bankruptcy, still going through the child custody battle. I was starting a new career while all three of those massive things were going on in my life. And how I had a growth mindset was, honestly, I just didn't feel like I had an option. Like sometimes I hear people complaining, and I was like, why are you complaining? You don't have an option. You got to do it. Like, there's no point in complaining. You got to do it. You got to put in the work. So I guess honestly, I just really didn't feel like I had an option as well.